In 2011, legendary Silicon Valley investor Marc Andreessen published his most famous essay, That Software is Eating the World. His assertion was that despite the dot-com bubble in the 1990s, software would permeate all industries, from agriculture to defense, in the form of online services, and there would be a new wave of high-growth, high-margin, defensible software businesses. Fast forward 10 years, and Marc's thesis has held true. The way software is developed, distributed, consumed, priced, and sold has radically transformed in the past decade. Historically, software was self-hosted. It was sold in stores, distributed in CDs, positioned as a lifetime one-and-done purchase, stored locally, and restricted to a single computer for offline use. Stability was valued above all else, and updates were rare and risky. Today, it's the opposite. Modern software is consumed as an online service, generally in the form of web applications or mobile applications. Digital distribution has become king. For anything that can't be accessed through an internet browser or the App Store, it can be downloaded directly. License keys and activation codes are virtual, and software is now meant to be used on multiple devices. Most of all, modern software is about rapid continuous improvement, where speed is the priority, even at the expense of stability. Updates are constant and new features are regularly introduced. You can see software as a service in nearly every facet of modern life. Look at Photoshop, a strictly licensed single device that was sold on CDs as a one-and-done purchase for $700 in the early 2000s. Nowadays, you can only get Photoshop as a $9.99 monthly service through Adobe Creative Cloud. Instead of building an iTunes library of $10 music albums and $30 movies, you can pay $9.99 a month for a service like Netflix or Spotify. Software as a service has become equally popular with enterprises. Salesforce, QuickBooks Online, Snowflake, Jira Cloud, and MongoDB are all leading B2B SaaS companies and products. None of this is really news, though. SaaS is a well-known phenomenon that's fueled by its unparalleled value creation and value capture. When software is delivered as a service, consumers aren't locked into long-term commitments or risking hundreds of dollars up front. You swipe a credit card for a few bucks, try out the service, and stop paying whenever you feel like you're not getting value. For consumers, SaaS is affordable, convenient, and flexible. For companies, SaaS allows them to monetize faster, ship code quickly, push updates after launch, and iterate. Most important of all, SaaS is good business. Facebook's gross margin hovers at 80%, Microsoft's at 70%, Google's gross margin is 60%, and Adobe's is at 90%. Adobe makes more money today with its $9.99 a month Creative Cloud SaaS than they did selling $700 Photoshop licenses back in the 2000s. When investors see margins like these, they can't resist jumping in. This has led to the flywheel effect of venture capital, startups, and IPOs that has been fueling tech for the past decade and funding software engineering jobs where 20-year-olds make six figures upon graduation. But what most people are missing is that while software as a service has become more popular, the standards and quality of software itself have been declining. Software as a service is so prevalent these days that the culture of startups and SaaS are basically intertwined. The ship fast, fail fast attitude has meant that SaaS products nowadays often launch way before they're ready, with bugs and incomplete functionality. Although companies try to ride through the initial backlash with fast follow improvements, they often don't live up to that promise. SaaS products have also become ruthlessly monetized, meaning that companies will paywall anything they can to get users to spend more, even if that feature is essential to using the service. As Marc Andreessen predicted, industries all over have indeed embraced software as a service, but there's one particular industry that has taken advantage of the declining standards to deliver aggressively monetized, yet progressively worse, unfinished, buggy SaaS products for maximum profit year after year after year. That is the gaming industry. In the old days, people would line up at GameStop or Target to get their hands on the latest video games. For $60, you get the game on a CD and a nice case. You could spend some more and pre-order the game to get special goodies. A few months later, you could drop $15 to $20 more for some downloadable content. Back then, the purpose of DLC was to extend a game's lifespan. After launch, if the game sells well, the studio goes back into R&D, players wait a few years, the sequel gets eventually announced at E3, pre-orders go live, players line up once again at GameStop, rinse and repeat. Back then, consumers knew what they were getting for $60, an 8 to 40-hour single-player campaign with maybe split-screen co-op and multiplayer. The traditional video game business model centered around this one-time $60 purchase. Make a good game, build up a fan base, and the more sequels you release, the more money that you'll make. But video games are moonshots. Making a good video game is hard. a good video game also doesn't always sell. To make a game, you invest millions of dollars every year for 2 to 5 years in continuous R&D. If you get to launch, you'll need to spend millions more on marketing. You do all this with no guarantee in the end that the video game you make will even sell. In the early 2010s, if you exclude indie games, video game development budgets were anywhere from $5 million to $50 million. If you include advertising and marketing, the total cost of producing a video game could be anywhere from $30 million to $300 million. Like movies, the ROI for video games is completely unknown until it launches. The only safe investments are the proven AAA franchises like Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, Halo, Mario, and Pokemon, where customers drop money on sequels and DLC without hesitation. Since the early 2000s, publishers like Activision, EA, Ubisoft, and Sega spend millions every year looking for the next blockbuster franchise. To this day, Call of Duty, FIFA, Madden, Assassin's Creed, Yakuza, Need for Speed, NBA 2K are all franchises that pump out a sequel every year. But AAA franchises don't always last. The once best-selling Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk series ended up being milked to death by their publishers. Sequels were launched so frequently that quality declined, players lost interest, and the IP became worthless. Because of the moonshot nature and the one-time monetization model, innovation was crucial to the gaming industry. Just like venture capitalists looking for the next hot startup, video game publishers take a similar scattershot approach to find the next Call of Duty or Halo. In the late 2000s, publishers were constantly bringing new IPs to market, funding up-and-coming studios, and encouraging creative freedom and risk-taking in hopes of fostering the next blockbuster game. Video games back then were made under the waterfall software development model. Under waterfall, you set a deadline years into the future, you plan out all the R&D to support that deadline, and you do design, art, programming, and testing in linear sequential phases. You assess regularly to see if things are still on track. And the objective for waterfall is rigorous planning and slow, incremental, stable software development. With waterfall, it wasn't uncommon for games to get delayed, but the end product released was still generally stable and complete. Modern video games are nothing like the offline single-player centric video games of the past. The most popular games today, Fortnite, Apex Legends, Warzone, Rust, PUBG, League of Legends, just to name a few, are all software as a service. The gaming industry refers to SaaS games as live services. Apex, Fortnite, Warzone, and League are all leading examples of free-to-play live services. GTA Online, Escape from Tarkov, PUBG, and Red Dead Online are all examples of popular titles where you still have to pay upfront to play. DLC has become the primary monetization model for modern video games. Microtransactions and loot boxes are present in so many video games to the point that not having them in a game is considered big news. And unlike traditional video games, which have fixed lifespans, modern live services are meant to last forever. Just like SaaS products in other industries, these games release a relentless stream of updates and content to keep players engaged and spending. Compared to the past, where players would spend $10 to $30 one time for maps and expansions, DLC nowadays is a never-ending spree of $10 season passes, $20 skins, and in-game cosmetics that can cost hundreds of dollars. Even the latest Battlefront, Battlefield, and Halo games all operate like a SaaS. At the same time, the quality of modern video games has declined. Fallout 76, Cyberpunk, Anthem, No Man's Sky, Battlefield 2042, and Halo Infinite are all recent examples of just how far standards have dropped. Launching buggy, unfinished SaaS games and then promising to fix it later is now standard industry practice. Modern games are made with a mix of waterfall and agile software development models. Under Agile, development is broken down into 2-week sprints to promote faster, frequent delivery of software, breaking up deliverables into small, bite-sized tasks, and promotes the flexibility to defer work into the future. As long as something is being shipped, no matter how small, it's considered a win. Almost every SaaS product in every industry these days is developed under Agile. Under Waterfall and the traditional single-player video games of the past, it would have been a death sentence to knowingly ship an incomplete or buggy game. Studios would much rather delay the launch than to launch a poor product. But with today's games and digital distribution, delays are fairly rare. Modern games launch even if the product is incomplete or unstable. Under Agile development and SaaS principles, this hasty output is permitted under the guise that improvements will come and everything will get better into the future. SaaS has transformed not only how video games are developed and monetized, but also the surrounding ecosystem and industry. The creativity, risk taking, anticipation of E3, the stream of new titles every year, and the constant emergence of up and coming studios all feel like relics of the past. Nowadays, fewer game studios are being funded, fewer IPs are coming to market, developers bypass E3 to talk directly with their consumers, publishers are putting themselves up for sale, and every game this generation seems to be a live service multiplayer with microtransactions. In this episode, we're going to look at 3 different gaming companies and see how their strategies and business models have evolved over time with software as a service. First is CD Projekt Red, the Polish company behind the best-selling Witcher video game franchise. While the industry has rotated to SaaS, multiplayer, and microtransactions, CD Projekt Red has actively resisted those trends. They're a deeply traditional studio who focuses exclusively on single-player RPGs. They openly reject pumping out sequels for profit, and insist that they'll only launch games when they're ready. CD Projekt Red's belief is that if you take the time and effort to make a great game, the quality will speak for itself, and the game will sell even years after launch. No microtransactions needed. CD Projekt Red's financials give us a real-world look at how successful, but also how volatile the traditional video game business can be. In 2011, CD Projekt Red launched Witcher 2. The game was a critical success, winning 50 awards and putting CD Projekt Red on the map as a promising young studio. But video game sales only accounted for 30% of the company's revenue that year. The company made most of its money back then as a distributor of movies in Poland. After launching Witcher 2, CD Projekt Red went back into waterfall development for Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk. Witcher 2 continued to sell after its launch, but in declining amounts. Video game sales dropped 50% from $10 million to $5 million 1 year after Witcher 2's console launch, but then rebounded 30% the year after. CD Projekt Red's top line also declined over the next 2 years as the studio launched no new games and was heads down developing Witcher 3. Between 2012 and 2014, Witcher 2 brought in a total of $23 million. For a game that cost $10 million to make, that's a 130% return on investment with an annualized ROI of 13% over 3 years of R&D and 4 years of sales. In 2015, CD Projekt Red released Witcher 3. The game was a monster success at launch and is considered to be one of the best video games ever made. In its first 6 weeks, 6 million copies of Witcher 3 had been sold. In comparison, it took The Witcher 2 2 years to sell 2.5 million copies. CD Projekt Red had struck gold. The company went from $30 million in 2014 to $177 million in 2015 with The Witcher 3, a 600% increase in revenue. Witcher 3 sales accounted for 87% of CD Projekt Red's revenue that year. Net income grew by 760%, going from $1 million in net income in 2014 to $76 million in 2015. CD Projekt Red's profit margin went from 5% to over 40%. The success of Witcher 3 elevated CD Projekt Red from a small up-and-coming studio to one of Europe's most respected and valued gaming powerhouses. It cost $81 million to make Witcher 3. Yet in its first year, Witcher 3 had already paid off its development costs with a 90% return on investment and an annualized ROI of 17% over 3.5 years of R&D and just 7 months of sales. Witcher 3 continues to sell well to this day. Its success validates CD Projekt Red's philosophy that good games, no matter how many years after launch, do indeed sell. There has been a post-launch decline in revenue, but it's been a gradual descent. Witcher 3 sales have dropped 30% every year after 2015. But the legacy of Witcher 3 lives on as the title recently surpassed 50 million copies sold and has become one of the top 10 best-selling video games of all time. From Witcher 3's success, we can understand why publishers like Activision, EA, and Ubisoft are all hunting for the next blockbuster game. You'll always miss more than you hit, but when you do hit, your revenue skyrockets by hundreds of millions of dollars, your profit exponentially increases, and your valuation goes up by several billion. All it takes is just one game. And you can easily snowball that success into annual sequels to keep money flowing. But that's not CD Projekt Red's approach. However, just because you made one good game doesn't guarantee that your next game will be just as good. CD Projekt Red snowballed the success of Witcher 3 into hype for its next game, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk had been in development for 8 years and was considered one of the most anticipated games of all time. Led by John Wick and the reputation of Witcher 3, gamers were expecting greatness even after numerous delays. The company promised a single-player game more immersive and dynamic than The Witcher 3, alongside a SaaS multiplayer with microtransactions. Fast forward to Cyberpunk 2077's launch, and the game was nothing short of a disaster. In response, CD Projekt Red basically turned Cyberpunk's single player into a live service, continually pushing out hotfixes, updates, patches, and new content to make the game playable. Beyond the game-breaking bugs, refunds, public apology, broken promises, unfinished state, and the bait-and-switch marketing, Cyberpunk 2077 was still a commercial success. CD Projekt Red's revenue quadrupled from $116 million in 2019 to $486 million in 2020 with the launch of Cyberpunk. Net income increased 6 times from $40 million to $255 million in the same time frame. Despite its disastrous launch and costing $300 million over 8 years of development, Cyberpunk 2077 still made out with a positive ROI in its debut. But there have been consequences. In 2021, CD Projekt Red's revenue and video game sales dropped over 60% just 1 year after Cyberpunk's launch. This 60% drop is a much faster plunge than forecasted and has doubled the decline of Witcher 3's sales 1 year after a game's launch. Consumer trust had clearly been lost. After some soul-searching, CD Projekt Red announced that they were canceling Cyberpunk's live service multiplayer game, they were committing to agile development over waterfall, and they were going to take time to figure out the right blend of offline and online experiences. With Cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red tried to deliver a traditional $60 single-player offline game with a dynamic scope of a live service. Simultaneously, they were building a live service with microtransactions on top of an unstable single-player game without any SaaS expertise or experience. CD Projekt Red's rise and fall is a demonstration of how volatile the traditional video game business can be. All it takes is one game to take you to the moon and one game to crash you back down. When you only launch one game every 5 years or so like CD Projekt Red, it intensifies the risk on an already risky coin flip. The longer you spend in development, the more pressure and greater the stakes become. As a gamer, I find it admirable how much CD Projekt Red believes in tradition. But if you're only shipping 2 games every 10 years, you have to get at least one of them right to sustain the company. If you get both of them wrong, bankruptcy can be just right around the corner. There are other companies similar to CD Projekt Red who have enjoyed historical success in the traditional video game business, but have fully pivoted to live services and microtransactions in recent years to keep up with the industry. But just building a SaaS product doesn't guarantee success, and this is the story of Square Enix. Square Enix is a Japanese publisher who owns iconic franchises like Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest, Tomb Raider, Deus Ex, Hitman, and Just Cause. With IPs like these, it can be argued that Square Enix's expertise with the traditional video game business and single-player RPG roots runs a lot deeper than CD Projekt Red. In 2013, Square Enix had a disastrous year with a $100 million loss. They had launched 3 major titles that year with Sleeping Dogs, Hitman Absolution, and Tomb Raider. Even though all 3 games were received favorably and had been developed as console-first titles, each significantly underperformed in sales. Square Enix ended up having to eat its own margins and incentivize retailers with rebates, discounts, and price protection in order to improve their sales. Square Enix's longtime CEO resigned and new leadership took over as part of a massive management reform. Square Enix's new leadership offered a thoughtful reflection to investors when the year came to a close. To quote their annual report, "The financial results in this fiscal year reflect an intrinsic problem within the game business model. Under the model of selling packaged games, the timing by which we may offer a game to customers is limited to the release of the product. Profit opportunities are non-existent during the game's development. Although we are making efforts to streamline our development process, game development requires increasingly long periods of time as the performance of game consoles improve. I believe the problem is not a one-time event. We face the structural issues of an inflexible earnings model and long-term, large-scale development resulting in a low rate of investment turnover. It is extremely important for us to enable a transition from a disc-based earnings model to a more flexible one. This will define the future of how we pursue game development at Square Enix." To give credit to the company's leadership, they recognized the risks of continuing to operate in this traditional business and saw the need to evolve. In 2014, Square Enix's top line in video game sales had mostly recovered thanks to continued MMO growth, and better than expected sales of a remastered Final Fantasy X, Thief, and a full price re release of Tomb Raider. In 2015, Square Enix had a quiet year and intentionally kept a low profile. The company was hard at work preparing what it believed to be an unbeatable lineup of AAA sequels that would make 2016 the most successful year in company history. Square Enix hit the market with all its best IPs in 2016. The blockbuster lineup featured Rise of the Tomb Raider, Just Cause 3, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Hitman, Final Fantasy XV, and Dragon Quest Builders. The company's revenue grew by 30% and video game sales skyrocketed by 42%, going from $860 million in 2015 to $1.2 billion in 2016. With the exception of Just Cause 3, all titles were critically acclaimed with solid commercial debuts. Square Enix's net income doubled from $75 million in 2015 to $153 million in 2016. Square Enix's revenue continued to grow in 2017 based on the sustained sales from its blockbuster lineup. Total revenue grew 20% from $1.6 billion in 2016 to $1.9 billion in 2017, which was largely driven by its 25% growth in video game sales. Even though all the numbers were going up, behind closed doors, the blockbuster lineup was actually underperforming and Square Enix was not happy. Nearly all the games in the blockbuster lineup had some form of SaaS and microtransactions built in. Hitman was actually released as a live service, meaning consumers paid full price for the game, but there were really only a few levels to play at launch. The studio explained that additional levels would be featured as DLC over time in episodes so that developers could take player feedback and refine future levels under agile development. This explanation landed pretty poorly with customers, and ultimately Hitman failed to sell. In 2017, 1 year after its launch, Square Enix gave up on Hitman entirely. They sold off the studio and franchise rights and wrote down a $43 million loss. While no official numbers have ever been given, the studio came out in 2021 to say that Hitman needed another 4 years of sales at its current pace just to break even. So all in all, 4 years of development and 9 years of sales for an ROI of 0. Deus Ex Mankind Divided launched as a full-price single-player game alongside Breach, which was a separate free-to-play live service in the same game universe. Both games were filled with microtransactions. Mankind Divided's single-player campaign was widely criticized for selling in-game upgrades and virtual currency. Breach as a live service incurred even greater criticism, selling pay-to-win items and in-game cosmetics for a game where players couldn't even see each other. Later, it was revealed that Square Enix had forced the company to implement microtransactions and SaaS into the game with little notice and support. Despite being critically acclaimed, Mankind Divided failed to sell, while Breach died at launch as a live service without a player base. Mankind Divided had been in development for 5.5 years and cost $55 million to make. Square Enix internally estimated that it needed to sell about 3 million copies to break even. As of today, Mankind Divided has reportedly only sold 2 million copies. So 5.5 years of development, 6 years of sales, and Mankind Divided is still operating at a loss. Just Cause 3 and Rise of the Tomb Raider were the only games out of the entire lineup to live up to its sales expectations. So Square Enix dropped Hitman, paused Deus Ex, and gave Tomb Raider and Just Cause the green light to proceed with its sequels. To Square Enix's leadership, the commercial failure of this lineup validated everything they had been saying since 2013. The company could no longer keep launching these expensive flops, nor could it continue taking half measures implementing microtransactions and live services into its games portfolio. If Square Enix was to succeed, the company believed it had to go all in on software as a service. In 2017, around the peak of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Square Enix signed a massive license agreement with Marvel. The company gave its most trusted development studios, Eidos Montreal and Crystal Dynamics, 3 years and a massive blank check to build the next big live service game based on the Avengers. In the interim, Square Enix launched Just Cause 4 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, sequels from the remaining few franchises that the company could trust to sell. Unfortunately for Square Enix, what it thought were safe investments turned out to be flops. In 2018, Square Enix's overall revenue declined 3% and video game sales dropped 4% despite the launch of both games. Leadership called out Just Cause 4's disappointing sales as the main reason for the company's struggles. On the other hand, Shadow of the Tomb Raider was one of the most expensive games ever produced, with a budget of $135 million over 3 years of development. Yet the game received a lukewarm reception and is widely regarded as the weakest installment in the reboot trilogy, both in terms of quality and sales. Square Enix continued to commercially stagnate from 2017 to 2020. In 2021, Marvel's Avengers was finally released as a full-price live service game that Square Enix hoped would be the money-printing SaaS that would make up for all the single-player flops of the past 5 years. Unfortunately, the game was a dud. Marvel's Avengers at launch was hammered by players and critics alike for being repetitive, buggy, unfinished, and boring. Square Enix released free DLC every quarter, adding new characters and missions as part of the SaaS playbook to try to keep users engaged. But players weren't sticking around. 2 months after its launch, the Steam player count for the game had declined by 96% to 1,000 players, even dropping as low as 500 players on certain days. Square Enix's revenue in 2021 grew 28%, and its video game sales spiked by 40% thanks to the strong initial sales from Marvel's Avengers. But once the dust had settled and word spread, consumers were ultimately unwilling to spend $60 on another unfinished live service game, and existing players had no interest buying $20 skins for a dying game. Marvel's Avengers cost an estimated $180 million across 3 years of development. With only 3 million copies sold to date, Square Enix's leadership admitted that once again, another big game had underperformed. In its latest earnings, Square Enix wrote down $105 million in losses directly associated with Marvel's Avengers. Even if you go all in on software as a service, it's just not a silver bullet. While EA and Activision are infamous for their microtransactions and ruthless monetization, there is one company that has consistently and quietly outperformed both of these giants when it comes to software as a service. That company is Take-Two Interactive, who owns Rockstar Games and 2K. Take-Two's portfolio features AAA franchises like BioShock, Borderlands, NBA 2K, Max Payne, XCOM, Red Dead, and Grand Theft Auto. Rockstar Games is a renowned studio who follows the traditional less is more development philosophy. Like CD Projekt Red, Rockstar only launches a handful of games every decade. The studio took 8 years to release a sequel to Red Dead Redemption and 5 years between GTA 4 and GTA 5. But the main difference between Rockstar and CD Projekt Red is that Rockstar consistently hits home runs. GTA 5 on launch broke industry records in 2013. To this day, the game maintains its record as the fastest selling entertainment product in history, earning $1 billion in its first 3 days. With a development budget of $265 million, GTA 5 achieved profit and a 280% ROI in just 72 hours. By 2018, Grand Theft Auto 5 had made $6 billion. And as of 2022, 160 million copies of the game had been sold worldwide. 5 years later in 2018, the studio hit another home run. The launch of Red Dead Redemption 2 set records, making the game the second fastest selling entertainment product in history, earning $725 million in its first 3 days. The game reportedly cost $400 to $500 million to make over 8 years of development. Even with this massive price tag, Red Dead Redemption 2 made profit in just 72 hours. When we look at Take-Two's business performance, what's wild is that the company is actually hitting new heights every year in revenue and income 4 years after Red Dead Redemption 2 and 8 years after GTA 5. Instead of the natural drop-off in sales that you would expect after a game's launch, Take-Two actually makes more money every year. While EA and Activision's revenue also increases every year, it's important to keep in mind that to keep up their growth, those two giants invest significantly more in R&D and release more games annually than Take-Two. In 2013, Take-Two's revenue grew over 100% with the launch of GTA 5. But the company kept its foot on the gas pedal and it used its middle-class franchises like Max Payne, XCOM, NBA 2K, and Borderlands to experiment with microtransactions and SaaS. Borderlands 2 offered a season pass at launch and released 16 different types of DLC over 2 years. NBA 2K13 was the first game in franchise history to offer virtual currency. Despite the lukewarm reception, the company quickly noted the value of transactions as high-margin revenue. By the end of the year, every Take-Two game, including BioShock Infinite, launched with a season pass. In 2014, Take-Two came up with an official term called recurrent consumer spending, in which they put microtransaction and DLC sales into one bucket and full game sales into another. By 2016, every Take-Two game launched with not only a season pass, but at minimum a 1-year roadmap of DLC. Recurrent consumer spending grew on average 60% every year from 2014 to 2017. In 4 years, microtransactions and DLC sales went from being a tiny piece of the pie at 11% to almost half of Take-Two's overall revenue. Long-tail monetization became the focus. Make $60 upfront and then try to make another $60 post-launch through DLC. But what's unique is that Take-Two actively encouraged its studios to meaningfully tailor DLC and microtransactions to the game and not simply copy and paste proven industry tactics like loot boxes or card packs. Take a listen to this refreshingly thoughtful commentary from Take-Two's CEO on DLCs and microtransactions.
And remember, when we talk about monetization, our goal is always to deliver a phenomenal entertainment experience first and foremost. And we figure that if we do that, monetization takes care of itself. We take it as axiomatic that the nature of an experience is the intersection of the quality of the experience and whether you feel you receive value for that experience. If you go to a phenomenal restaurant and have an incredible meal, but the bill it should have cost, you're not going back. Even if you can afford it, even if you're price inelastic, you're not going back. It just doesn't feel good. So we need to make sure that we always deliver more than what we charge. And that's the goal of our company, and that's the goal of all of our labels.
In 2019, the company's revenue exploded once again by 50% with the launch of Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead Online and GTA Online, live services that were widely criticized at their launch for being buggy, repetitive, and half-baked, were now picking up steam. The consistent flow of free annual updates, co-op missions, and game modes to both Red Dead Online and GTA Online were paying off, and players were returning in massive numbers. By 2020, Take-Two had surpassed the $3 billion mark in annual revenue for the first time in company history, fueled by record concurrent consumer spending in NBA 2K, GTA Online, and Red Dead Online. In 2021, microtransaction and DLC sales grew 50% from $1.3 billion to $2.1 billion in a single year. This was the first time in company history where concurrent consumer spending surpassed full game sales, making up 62% of the company's total revenue. That same year, Grand Theft Auto Online hit a record number of active players and microtransaction sales, along with better than expected performance from Red Dead Online. Critics might say that it's not SaaS, but microtransactions that have transformed Take-Two. But I think that abstraction downplays what the company has accomplished over the past few years. What Take-Two has done is they've modernized their legacy single-player titles like GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption into thriving live services with high engagement. They then monetize that engagement with transactions. For the other games in its portfolio, like Borderlands, XCOM, and BioShock, Take-Two didn't rush to those and say, hey, let's turn them all into live services then. What they did was they said, hey, it's possible that a lot of these games just don't work as live services, so let's just commit to season passes and DLC, but let's not shoehorn those in. Let's integrate it as thoughtfully and meaningfully as possible. If all you need to make money is to introduce microtransactions or make the game a live service, then Square Enix and CD Projekt Red would be in much better places today. Take-Two's lessons for the industry are powerful. Microtransactions are how you can monetize software as a service, but it's not something you can mindlessly throw in and just expect results. At the same time, just like not every product should be a SaaS, not every game works as a live service. Software as a service is a format that has to be strategically applied and a muscle that requires continuous dedication year after year after year.